I would like to introduce Assistant Chief Scott Williams with the Sacramento Fire Department. You need to get it closer to you or either you.
Good morning. Okay. Sorry I'm late. I had another meeting to attend to. So. On behalf of the city, Sacramento Fire Department, and our fire chief and the city administration, I'll welcome you guys to the Sacramento meeting. I'm Chief Scott Williams, Assistant Chief. I'm in charge of communications and logistics and our B shift for the fire department. I started in comms probably back in 2000 when I got to work for the Olympic trials that were here in Sacramento, and that was my first taste into the comm world. You know, just like most of us as a kid, I played with radios, transistors, built things, destroyed a lot of my mom's stuff, and she still hates me to this day, but my son does that now, so she says I finally got even. So just a little bit more of my background. I'm also a ComS for our USTAR team. We've got 28 national teams, and basically it's the equivalent of a comm team, but we do it on a nationwide level. And with USAR, we've gone all over the world with different types of incidents, from Oklahoma to the Atlanta bombing, space shuttle incident, 9/11, Katrina, and so on. So from a comm perspective and from a field operations, we really get a true understanding of what it means to be part of an organization like this and understanding where we come from. I've been an APCO member since probably around 2001, 2002, and me personally, I was deployed to the incidents in Katrina and Galveston for those particular hurricanes. So I actually got to support our team when it went to Oklahoma and 9/11 and some of the other events. So I really do appreciate what APCO's done for advocacy and technical issues and how it's actually affected us in the field. And I'm one of the first comm chiefs in this region who's made it to a chief who actually understands comms. I've, for many years, have fought with people who didn't understand comms and radio and called me a geek, but you know, it's really made a big difference in a lot of the things that we do and how we do it. So on that, thank you again for your support for public safety, and I appreciate it. You guys have a good day.
Great, thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. My apologies for being a little bit late. I'm taking a class out of Sac State today in how to be a better executive. My boss had me go to that. I think she's trying to disprove the old adage that you can't teach an old dog new tricks, so that's why I'm out there. I'm trying to prove her wrong. So what I'd like to do today is kind of go over the year in review of the 911 office. And real quick, how many PSAP representatives are here today? Quite a few? Good. A lot of this will pertain to you as far as how things go and how we deal with you. For everybody else, it'll be a good education on how the 911 office functions within California and how we support 911 services throughout the state. Real quickly, these are the major initiatives or projects we have been working on over the past year. And before I actually get into them, I want to give you a quick background on the 911 office itself, how we're set up. We're a relatively small office for dealing with all of California. Actually 16 staff on board, divided into 4 sections. Part of it is the business management section, and they really deal with the policy, making sure PSAPs are notified on how our office works, changes we make that impact the PSAPs on how they work with the 911 office. We have a section on financials, which everything that gets bought in the way of 911 that comes out of the Sentinel Fund for California comes back through our office. We have to review all those bills, make sure they're correct. If there's disputes with a vendor, we take care of that. We have 2 staff that actually take care of that, and they do a very, very effective job. We have our consultants, 4 individuals who work with the PSAPs, and their job is really to occasionally sit down with them, look where they are financially as far as money they have to spend, how they're going to go about replacing their equipment, when they're going to replace it, help work with the vendors to get that done in an expedient time. And then we have people who monitor technology as far as 911 goes. So they're looking at what's coming along new in the world of 911 technology. We do tests on it, we monitor it, we work with the vendors to see how that's going to impact California or how it's going to benefit California. So all these people, the 15 of them, work very, very efficiently to make sure we can push forward 911 in California. One of the major impacts that happened back in December, our previous director, Ryan Doolin, had proposed 7 policy changes from what was happening in the past. The first 4 that we have up here were really accepted early in 2014, are in place now and working pretty well. The first one, setting the maximum travel reimbursement for travel within California with state, which makes sense. When we pay out as a state government, we want to make sure we are monitoring funding very well. So reimbursing the PSAPs for when they travel equivalent to what the state gets for state rates. That's worked out very well so far, no issues there. Providing an annual training allotment of $3,000 and sunsetting the NINA fund. That is in place now. So really we've given each PSAP $3,000. They use that for any kind of 911 training throughout the year. One of the things we are doing is to make it a little more efficient for the PSAPs is we are trying to pre-approve as much training as possible when it is applicable. Major events such as NINA, APCO, things like that. We do pre-approve those so they don't have to get requests and approval from us every time they have to go out to one of those. We're also looking at the other classes that come up. As they do come up, we review them. We look at course content and we make a decision, is this really worth pre-approving or not? So we're really trying to develop that list, and as it is developed, it will be placed on our website so PSAPs can go to that and see which ones are pre-approved so they don't have to constantly ask for pre-approval. Setting the maximum rates for foreign language. We do have a contract with Language Line. It was established this year, and it sets the rate at 59 cents per minute. And every place I go, I'm told I have to tell the PSAPs, you really need to get onto the state contract. And one of the main reasons is it guarantees a 59 cent per minute. They can't go above that. And if there's issues with the contractors, we don't expect to be, but if there are issues, the state will go to bat for you and we will deal with it because it's our contract. If you're off on your own, you've developed your own PO, you have issues, you have to deal with that. There's no guarantee a rate may stay the same, it could change. But we will take care of it in that particular case. The other one, sunsetted the wireless service policy. That was a situation we were subsidizing carriers 5 cents per line for delivering wireless services in California. There was some review of that at the national level. We saw that, we determined we did not have to do that anymore, so we actually sent out the letter in May telling the wireless carriers we were not going to be subsidizing them anymore. We expect to see a savings yearly of about $10 million plus from just doing that one thing. So all of these have really been in place to help save the state money, make better use of the Setna fund. There's 3 remaining initiatives. Excuse me for 1 second. I have to get my water here. 3 remaining initiatives are still in place, and this really has to do with funding through the Setna. The first one is in regards to submitting a spending plan. When we look at the Setna, every year we make adjustments to the Setna based on how much money is required to fund 911 services in California. For us to do that and for us to make an accurate projection on where we need to be, we need to see how much money we're going to spend, just like anybody would with their household budget. So what I've done is right in here, just kind of laid out the normal sequence of events that we go through as we're making the recommendation and before the surcharge goes into place. As I said, October 1st, we have to make a recommendation to the Board of Equalization on how much money the surcharge for the Setna is going to be. And for those of you who are unfamiliar with the Setna, it is funded by a surcharge on voice communications for interstate calls meaning calls originating and terminating within California for landline, voice over internet protocol, or cellular. It's adjustable between 0.5% to 0.75% of that portion of your phone bill. And if you look on your phone bill, you'll see the 911 surcharge tax on there. It comes on your landline bill, it comes on your cellular bill. So that is what is used to fund that. We have to make that recommendation to the Board of Equalization every year. So we need to get the numbers in ahead of time so we can make an accurate representation or understanding of what we're actually going to change that surcharge to. That is given to BOE. BOE reviews that in October. Once it's reviewed at their meeting, it goes on to their minutes. Once it goes on to their minutes, it becomes official. They send out a notification late November, December. It's posted. It's currently posted on the Board of Equalization website. That goes into effect on January 1st of the following calendar year. Not the fiscal year, but it goes into effect on the calendar year. So that's how we fund the CETNA. So that's kind of the reason behind us asking PSAPs to give us that spending plan up front. What a spending plan actually constitutes, well, that's still subject to some negotiation. It could be very detailed. It could be more of a number that we're looking at or we expect to spend. So that's one of the things that we're going to be working with the working group established by the advisory board. We have a meeting with them on the 17th, and that's one of the subjects we'll be talking about. The next one, providing funding for incremental and system costs consistent with statute and sunset an annual accrual process. Up till this point, when PSAP's accrued fund, it was based on call positions, number of call positions based on volume of calls to the PSAP. They accrued funding over the first 5 years, and if they didn't spend equipment or spend their funding at that time, they continued to accrue. So they could build up a relatively good pot of money. When you look at the Warren Act, which established 911 in California, and you look at the Revenue and Taxation Code, they're a little bit different. They talk about incremental funding and cost to build out a system. So it's really one of those discussions, what really constitutes is needed to build out or support a 911 PSAP, and how much funds are needed for additional costs beyond the basic equipment that is required. That's one of the things we'll be discussing at the meeting with the working group, and that's probably the one that's going to be most discussion. It really is, because it really has to do with funding and how much money the PSAPs will have to support their operations. The next one changes the equipment replacement from 5 to 7 years. Again, I don't see that one as a major issue. We've looked at some of the numbers and stuff like that, so that one I think we'll be able to work through relatively quick. I'm trying to do two things at one time here, and it's becoming difficult. Wanted to go into the CETNA fund, and every time I go out and I talk, I've always mentioned the CETNA fund to some extent and given a brief description of what the CETNA fund is, what it does, how it supports 911, but I want to spend a little more time today because of the policy changes that were presented so people can understand where the CETNA fund is, what we need to do in the future, and how we need to make sure we maintain that fund so we can support 911 in California. Just to go back over, it's supported under Revenue Taxation Code. If you read through it, the first portion of it, it's pretty straightforward. It talks about how we have to report to BOE, how we set the surcharge, et cetera. You don't want to read the whole thing because the second part really has to deal with vendors. It's funded through surcharge on interstate calls, as I mentioned before, very straightforward. Surcharge is no less than 0.5% or greater than 0.75% of the calls. We currently set that at 0.75%. That was increased this year. We made the recommendation back in October. It was approved and is currently published on the BOE's website. Again, we just need to recommend it by October 1st. Concerns with the CETNA, and this is important that we get this addressed in the near future. It has shown a consistent decline since approximately 2009, 2010. And it's a relatively steep decline, and I'll have a graph here in just a second to demonstrate where that's going. We can't increase the surcharge beyond 0.75%. We know the decline is due to the reduction in the amount of voice communications that take place now. We know people are giving up landline services. They're going to cellular. They're not talking as much. They're going to data. Surcharge is based on voice. Because of that, we're seeing that reduction in income every year, and every year it's decreasing. Over the past 3 years, we've seen an average of a negative 4.7 decrease in the surcharge revenue coming into California, and that does have a big impact. And of course, we only receive funds from interstate voice communications. This is a graph of how the surcharge or the Setna fund has worked over the past few years. If you look in 2005, 2006, the big blue line is the total income or the total appropriation we have for the surcharge. There's two things that go on here. You have the revenue generated by the surcharge, which is the 0.5 to 0.75%. Then whatever is left over at the end of the fiscal year that is not spent is carried over into the next fiscal year, and that becomes part of the appropriation. So if I have $150 million in total revenues at my disposal, I only spend $100,000, that extra $50,000 is carried over to the next fiscal year, added to the incoming revenue, and that becomes my appropriation as part of the Setna. If you look at the blue line, it's decreased quite a bit over the past few years. The green line right about here is where we made the change to the surcharge to 0.75%. So you see a little bit of bump in revenue coming in. The bump right before it is actually a repayment of $28 million that was borrowed from the Setna a few years earlier. The yellow line is the yearly expenses, not the appropriation, but the yearly expenses that we spend on support of 911 activities throughout California for the year. From right there over, we took an average over all the time, and that is the average expenditures every year of what we spend on 911 activities. That's about $104 million. All numbers up till this point here are actual numbers from year-end statements, year-end fund statements, and you can see those in the governor's budget. They're published every year, so those are actual numbers of where the Setna's been. From the green line to the right side are projections based on the average decline in revenue income from the Setna. So if you look, if we hadn't done anything and not changed the surcharge, kept it 0.5%, we would pretty much be going in the red right around the end of 14-15 fiscal year, which is not good. So by increasing that surcharge to 0.75%, we were able to extend that out about 2 years. So somewhere into 15-16, projections right now would indicate that things stay the same the way they are. We would need to make a change somewhere to how the Setna is funded. So. And when we actually did projections, we used a little bit more lenient depreciation. We actually did about a 3.5% versus 4.75%. So that number can change a little bit. What we are doing right now to make sure the Setna does stay soluble in the future, of course we have increased the Setna surcharge to 0.75%. That actually generated an income of about $38 million per year just in doing that, based on the revenues we've been getting. What that accounted for individuals' phone bill was an increase of about 7 cents per month, or 84 cents per year, an increase in what you pay on the surcharge. Not a whole lot. We're also looking at all projects coming forward and examining them for cost. The Setna right now, when you looked at the numbers, the yellow line, where's it at? There it is really based on supporting and replacing equipment, not really looking at building out into next gen or advanced IP networks and stuff like that. So it's really based on replacement of equipment. So as new projects come forward, and we do get requests to do hosted solutions, do basic ESINet solutions and things like that, we really have to do a review over these next 2 years to make sure we don't increase costs a lot over what we currently have. Anytime we increase If we increase cost above there, that's going to take that line there and slide it over to the left, and it's going to reduce the amount of time we have to actually fix the Setna. So we're being very cautious right now as new proposals do come forward and really looking to see what the actual fiscal impact to the Setna is going to be. Long term, the Setna is based in government code. So we have to change government code to change the way the Setna is funded. We have put in a request to the governor's office to change the funding. It has been approved in concept by Department of Finance. It has not been approved by the governor's office yet, but we expect that to happen. One of the concerns we do have is the governor is coming up for re-election next year. So anytime you change the funding to the Senate, it can be considered an increase in taxes. So we're really probably looking at this as a 2-year bill to get the Senate changed. So that's why it's so important that we watch the funding to make sure we keep that last black line on the left as far out as possible and not let that come back over to the left, from going out right, coming back left, and keeping it out as far as possible so we don't go into the red with the Setna. A couple of things we need to make sure we look at is the surcharge basis. It has to be sustainable. Right now, as we mentioned, it is tied to voice communications for the different types, whether it be voice, cellular. That we know now that's not sustainable. The Warren Act and the Revenue Taxation Code that governs this was established in 1977. Probably back in those days, they looked at voice. Voice is the thing. It's going to be around for years and years and years. They didn't think about cell phones and data and everything like that. It's going to take place a few years later. So we don't want to tie it to something that is going to exhibit the same properties down the road. So it's got to be something that's going to be constant and stays there for a long time. Things like a phone number, a cell phone itself, things that you pretty much know is going to be at the end of that communications. It's got to be adjustable. Some states have a flat rate, which is good. We have an adjustable rate right now. And really, if you're being a good steward of the funding, you don't want to have that huge income gap. It doesn't look good. It's hard to defend. You really need to be able to adjust the rate yearly for the amount of expenditures you should be seeing for 911. So we want to make sure that's adjustable. So when we go forward, we're going to propose an adjustable rate for the Setna that we can adjust yearly based on the amount of income or that we feel we need to pay the expenses for Setna or for 911 for that year. Of course, evaluate future funding requirements. Again, we know we have to transition to 911 down the road. It's not going to be cheap. It costs more money, mainly because we have to keep 2 networks in place as we build it out. We have to keep the existing network in place as we build out the next-gen network. So we're going to be supporting 2 networks, and that's going to cost some bucks. So we're going to be looking at that. And then, of course, establish new legislation, which we are currently working on. As I mentioned, we have made a request up to the governor's office. These are some of the funding models other states use. Nobody does it the same. That's the one thing we did notice. I have California's up on top just as a reference. Then you should look at some of the other states. Oregon charges a flat 75 cents for a wireless, wireline, or VoIP. For cellular, they charge it per device. It's not based on voice or the amount of time or usage, just based on per device. Utah charges a local surcharge, and then a state tax. So it varies. So that's one of the things we're looking at is what other states do, what would best fit California as we move forward. One of the other projects we're working on is Text to 911. And that's going to be available to all PSAPs in May 15th of this year. The 4 major carriers will be pushing that out. There's 2 or 3 different options right now that we're looking at as far as how Text to 911 can be delivered. The first one is short message service, the TTY. TTY is what's available right now to the deaf and disabled community, and I know that's probably not the politically correct term, but it's the one I do remember offhand. It uses existing camera trucks, which are analog trunks. The next one is SMS to TTY using a gateway. Those are for conditions where a PSAP may be fed by an IP circuit, but we have to convert it back into a CAMA type application at the PSAP. That is not one that's really going to be used a lot. It's one we're kind of testing more than anything else. A web-based application where they actually go through an internet connection, and once the text comes in, it's converted, pushed out over the internet to the PSAP. The issue there is it doesn't feed into the call taking equipment. You have to have a separate monitor to pick up the web application. And then there's the integrated solution where it comes in over an IP circuit. It's fed directly into the CPE equipment at the PSAP, and the call taker can monitor at that point. One of the decisions the PSAPs will have to do is decide if they want to take text in May. We have been out testing some of the applications as they do become available. In fact, I was in Downey yesterday. We were testing the SMS to TTY-TAP applications. There's about 12 or 13 tests we go through with each application. So in April, we will publish a report on the various applications we've tested, so we have a constant comparison. So the PSAPs can take a look at and decide what would be best for them when they move forward. We tested the web application at CSU Long Beach back in, when was that, December? And then we'll be doing the other two tests in February in Butte County and at Long Beach Police Department. Some of the issues we know are currently things we have to overcome with text. Caller location information is very limited when you do text. When you make a call on your cell phone right now, and when you dial that number, it activates your GPS. So they can locate you based on GPS through the cell company. With texting, it doesn't do that. Remember, text was designed as a social application, not emergency services application. So they're trying to get that to work into an emergency services application. Verizon actually has a location agent application you can try to download on your cell phone. I tried, it didn't work, and a couple other people tried, it didn't work. We were able to borrow a couple cell phones from a Verizon dealer who did have the application loaded on, so we could use that and test that in the field as we were doing some of the tests. Currently what they do right now is when a cell phone makes a text call to 911, they locate in the centroid of the cell sector. That doesn't give you a whole lot of location information for the individual because that can be a very, very big area. So that's something that's going to have to be worked on down the future. You can't transfer text calls right now. And that is one thing in the 911 world. When a fire or a medical emergency comes in, those get transferred from the primary PSAP to a secondary PSAP so they can respond. In this particular case, if a fire or emergency comes in, they will not be able to transfer at this point in time. And I say that with some reservation because we were actually able to transfer from a web-based application yesterday to a TTY application, but that was actually transferred to the text control center. We have not been able to do that through normal transfer methods through the selective router. We'll be doing that in February when we go down and do future test trials at that point in time. Another big issue is language translation. California interprets 96 languages through 911, or should have the ability to interpret 96 languages. At this point in time, we don't have anything in place, and we know the vendors are seriously looking at this because it is going to be an impact, but there has to be a way to interpret languages as they come in. Pushing text to 911 out with caveats is probably not the most opportune way of doing that. So these are some of the issues we do have to overcome before, and hopefully the vendors are working on it. We can get that taken care of before May. We'll see. Just to give you an idea of some of the stuff that happened at Downey PD, it took about 20 seconds to set the call up. When we did the web-based application, it took about 30 seconds to set the call up. That's from the time the person in the field actually hits the send button till the time it shows up on the call taker screen. For texting, straight TTY, it emulates the way TTY terminal does. You see one character at a time pop across the screen because it's very, very slow baud rate. The web application was very quick. Once you set that call session up, texting back and forth between the individuals is just like texting on your cell phone right now. It was very, very quick back and forth. The screen popped up. It showed a normal screen like you'd see on your cell phone, small text boxes for each response. It was very quick. Again, we couldn't get XY coordinates. We tried, and call transferring is limited. Yesterday when we were working on texting at Downey, when we put calls on hold, there's no store and forward application for text right now. So if a call taker puts someone on hold, goes to pick up another call, any texts that come in during that time are lost. So you lose portions of the conversation. And again, these things that could be corrected in the future. We were actually able at one point in time to lock up the system doing that. So these are some concerns that we really want to make sure get corrected before text goes out there. In this particular application, the call taker only had one text box she was dealing with. So when we had two texters going on at the same time, those texts used the same text box. So you had to differentiate between which person you were talking to at the time. So it could be a little confusing in that case, where the web application, it opened up a new session, a new text box, so you could really separate the two. So those are just some of the things that happen in those test trials. It's not to say they won't get resolved. I'm sure we do work with the carriers on this. We meet with them bi-weekly on text to 911. We're working with Verizon and TCS at this point in time. So hopefully with the work we do, with the tests we do, we can get these things corrected in the near future. One of the other areas we're working on big time is the education awareness program. Just for the reasons I talked about with texting, as this does come out and becomes available to the public, we're going to have to educate the public on how to use text in 911. As we move into next gen, we're going to have to educate the public on how to use 911. So we are working on an education awareness program where we can work with the PSAPs to help them educate the public, so we work in conjunction with them in supplying the materials, helping them work out and deliver messages to get people to understand really what 911 is, how you should use it. It's not meant to call where the local Walmart is, but really is for emergency services and stuff like that. So these are some of the messages we're doing. The objective, of course, is to educate the public, first thing, reduce the amount of non-emergency calls that come into a PSAP because they do take the place of emergency calls. That's the primary reason, let's get the emergency calls. And develop an ongoing program, sustainable program that we can work with on the PSAP so we can push these messages out down over the years. Project started in 2012. It's scheduled to be completed in 2014. Currently right now in the project, we're working with the PSAPs, gleaning information on what they currently do, what type of messages they put out, talking to the public. We're doing surveys. We're working with Ogilvy Communications. It's a worldwide multimedia corporation. So we're surveying how the public views 911, how they use it. We have pilot programs that we'll be dealing with or starting soon, approximately May, with 8 PSAPs, and start looking at some of the types of ways we can get information out to the public. Some of the information we've gleaned from the surveys, and just for information, if you look at number 1, serious medical or health crisis like a stroke or heart attack, 24% of the people responded, said that was the case. If you go back to what I was talking about with text, if that comes in, that's the situation that has to be transferred. So that's a little bit of a concern right there. Car accidents, public disturbances, you can see kind of how those came out. In this particular survey, this is a public survey. We went out to the public to see how they viewed 911, how they used it. This sample was around 1,000 people. This kind of looks at how people view texting. Right now, 17%, or I should say 14% of the total think you can text to 911. 63% aren't sure. So there's some education that needs to be done. Among those who called in the past 2 years, and of the sample set they used, about 50% call on a regular basis more than other people do. So you have the same people calling text or calling 911 more often than other people do. And of those, 17% thought they could call 911. So just some interesting ideas. Of course, the primary answer we're looking for is no, you can't text to 911, but that was only 20% of the surveyed. These next slides are more geared toward how the PSAPs deal with education right now. And again, we had 223 PSAPs, or 228, excuse me, respond to our inquiries, which we do appreciate. There's 455 PSAPs in California, so we had over 50% response on that, which was nice. First one is, what do you currently do for outreach? And if you look, community organizations tend to be the primary way we go out and we educate the public for 911. Naturally, if you look at smaller PSAPs, 41%, medium 60%, up to the larger PSAPs, 71% utilize that method of getting the word out. And you can see how some of the other ones go. What are the messages most PSAPs try to push out? First one, know your location. Very, very important for a call taker and for that individual, if they need assistance, that they know their location. They can't be guaranteed that that cell phone is going to provide it to them. So it's important they do know it. Also, it's for police, fire, medical. They're trying to get that word out. So we'll continue to use this information to develop outreach programs for the public as we move down the road. And one last quick slide. Greatest unfulfilled outreach needs, labor, time, and resources, money. That's pretty obvious. With the work people do, the work the 911 community does, those type of things are probably a big constraint on getting that word out. So that's part of the education and awareness program, is to help them be more efficient in getting that out and see what we can do to help you promote that 911 out to the public. Moving forward with the education awareness program, these are things we need to do in the future and we're working on. Of course, one is gather additional education outreach materials. The contractor is using those to help develop messaging for the future, refine the messages to make sure we are hitting the target audiences, pilot programs with the PSAPs so we can try these out, see if they work. It's not only the PSAPs that have to be able to do this, it's my office also, because we're going to have a big involvement of this, so we got to make sure staffing's available, money's available, we're getting the word out we want. We're going to be doing another consumer survey, expanding the target audience to see if we can refine some of those numbers down. And of course, again, the objective is to define and strengthen PSAP education. The other project we have been working on is the delivery of wireless phase 2. This has become pretty prominent, and what we're really talking about here is the ability when an individual calls 911 on a cell phone, is their location, their latitude and longitude is provided to the PSAP as quickly as possible. Back in the mid 2000s, 2005, 2006, cellular companies were supposed to have all this equipment in place with handsets and start to be able to provide that. It was doing very good for a while. It's kind of diminished in the last few years. This became prominent in July. Cal Nina sent a letter off to the chairman of the FCC, and it got a lot of notice. Back in early December, there was a hearing that our director went back and represented California on, along with some other members from the PSAP community, to discuss what the issues were. And it really is a situation where you've got to have the combined efforts of the carriers, the PSAP communities, and the states work together to solve this problem. I took this quote out of NINA, or I took this out of NINA, that they're allowed up to 30 seconds to provide a valid phase 2 location. So that means from the time you hit the send button, the carriers are given 30 seconds. A lot of times cell phone 911 calls come into the PSAP, they don't last 30 seconds. So what they're delivered is the phase 1 information, which is the address or the latitude, longitude of the cell tower. By the time the call's over, the information's ready from the carrier. At that point in time, the latitude, longitude doesn't mean a whole lot. So the effort here is really, how do we find a way to get that latitude, longitude to the PSAP that first time when it comes through, so they don't have to rebid it as quickly as possible. And that's going to take some work. Verizon tends to be one of the better carriers in doing this, from what we've seen. We did a project up in Northeast California, we call it the Northeast Grant Project, where we're actually able to route based on the latitude, longitude of the caller. We were able to get that information within 6 seconds, And we could identify that person and direct them to the proper PSAP. And what that does, it eliminates the transfer times from coming into the wrong PSAP and having to transfer over. We saved about 100 hours in transfer time over about 5 or 6 months during the first portion of that project. So that was pretty good. So you can see it's really important that that information gets, or that gets corrected. This is a graph of how wireless phase 1, phase 2 have been delivered over the years. If you look back in October 10, prior to that, we were really getting pretty good phase 2 information coming into the PSAPs. Somewhere around June 11th, it changed. It crossed over and now it's going kind of down, some more phase 1 information. We don't know why at this point in time. I don't have a good answer for it. The carriers still kind of hang on to thing, well, it's there after 30 seconds. All you got to do is pull it down, do a rebid. But this does need to be corrected. But this is just some of the information we pull out of our tracking systems so we can see how things are going in California. Some of the efforts we're doing to help correct this. We continue to work with the FCC. We've been working, at least since I've been in office since June now, working with David Firth. He's very strongly involved in this particular area, so we provide him information when we can, work with the PSAPs. We meet with the carriers regularly on these issues, and of course other agencies such as NENA and NASDA who have a definitely involvement in these particular issues to get those corrected. One thing we did do recently, we sent out a recommendation to all the PSAPs to start automatic rebidding, which essentially is once the call comes in, it's received, it is an automatic rebid after a few seconds, so it can pull that information down from the carrier, assuming that it's ready. In that particular case, though, there's some timing things there, because when the call comes in, there's a certain amount of time before it's set up. During that time, the position determining equipment from the carrier is grabbing that latitude and longitude, so we're really telling the PSAPs at this time to work with the technicians, and when they do come out to reestablish the auto rebid functions, is to work with them and spend some time doing some test calls to make sure you've got that timing as best as possible, because you don't want to have to keep rebidding and rebidding and rebidding to get that call. Next gen. That's going to be the big thing for California over the next few years. We've been operating off analog platforms for 40 years now, 40, 50 years. And technology itself has changed. And technology is driving the fact that we're going to have to move forward and stay up with technology to be able to provide better services to 911. So we're really looking at a statewide IP network that has advanced routing capabilities to provide information to the PSAPs quickly and much more efficiently. Additional things we'll be able to do. We'll be able to transfer video over a network like this. So somebody at an incident can send video of actually what's going on at a wreck, at a shooting, what have you, still pictures. It will definitely support text to 911 much better than it is right now. So there's just some of the things that we will be able to do with Next Gen 911. Some of the biggest things we have to do, of course, funding. As we talked about earlier, we have to get the SETNA corrected. We have to be able to set that so as we do push out Next Gen 911 and we are paying for duplicate networks, that we can accommodate that. Then once that system's in place, we go into maintenance, we can reduce that funding back down again so we're not building up these huge sums of money, which is not fiscally feasible. Learn from other states. There's about 9 states right now that are pushing out Next Gen projects. Tennessee, Florida, I believe Michigan is one, and when you look at the costs associated with them, they are all different. Florida spends about $200 million a year right now on Next Gen. Other states are doing 15, 20 million, and Next Gen is probably a little bit different in each state. It's not all the same. I doubt you could take Florida, compare it to what Tennessee is doing, and say they're doing exactly the same thing. So we're really looking at what other states doing, how they've gone about establishing procurement methods, how they've gone about rolling it out, how long they've taken to roll out. Part of the things we'll be doing there is definitely communicating with our partners in those states, working with some consultants and help us establish a plan to roll out Next Gen over the next few years. We currently do have a strategic plan and a roadmap in place, but we do need to take a look at that and probably update that and bring it more current with where we are at today. Of course, we need to define what a statewide network in California is going to look like. ESI net's basically defined as a network of networks. So it's a combination of multiple networks that make up one big network. But how does that work in California? We've got 455 PSAPs that we have to deal and make sure they all fit into this network and it supports them. We support 25 million 911 calls per year. So that's a lot of stuff we're going to have to make sure we can incorporate and make sure those calls are delivered efficiently. Of course, develop a statewide strategy, funding, and that's one thing we're working on right now is developing an RFP to secure network services and next-gen services, so that will help us out in deployment going forward. That is essentially update where we're at right now. So if there's any questions, I'll be glad to answer them for you. So but thank you. Yes, Manny.
Question for you regarding the funding model.
Yes.
Of all that you see throughout the state, which ones are doing well? Secondly, which ones do you want to copy?
That's a good question. Which ones are doing well? I really don't know, Manny. I have not had a chance to talk to the different states. The one that I would lean to right now without making a commitment is probably the ones that have a fixed basis that they tie the Senate to. Oregon's is one that I've looked at very closely, and I think it's probably APCO because it is tied to either a phone number or a device. And those things are going to be there down the road regarding how you transmit the information, you know, whether it's data, voice, or what, who knows what's going to be in the future. So, yes.
Do you have a timeline as to when the state may implement next-gen?
We know it's going to be at least 2 years, because at least 2 years. That's just to get the funding in place. What I've seen with other states, I can't say the word, build out times, I'll use that instead, generally go between 5 to 8 years to build out a full state system. California is quite a bit bigger. Most states have PSAPs, number of PSAPs in the range of 175, 200, we're at 455, quite a bit bigger area. So yeah, we're probably looking at 5 to 8 year build out, I would say.
Yeah, I mean, we're working on next-gen projects all over the country. Tennessee, New York, Kansas, South Dakota, North Dakota. 116 PSAPs.
Yeah.
So it's a fraction.
Yeah, and some of it depends on too on how they're actually administered throughout California, whether they're localized within the county. I mean, we have a different model than what other states use, so actually how they plan to build out changes based on things like that.
Thanks.
Other questions? Okay, thank you very much for your time.